You're paralyzed. Just like that day when you did nothing. You did nothing. Now, sink into the floor.
Wait.
Sink.
Sorry, what's that? You say you are free because you live in a democracy?
It's just really a hard thing. It's really a hard thing. Your world just becomes fantastically complicated when you don't believe in evolution.
Evolution say people came from monkeys, and the question is, why is there still monkeys? Is these the retarded monkeys? They didn't turn into people just yet.
If you want to deny evolution, that's fine. But don't make your kids do it, because we need them.
Wake up. To see the farm is to leave it. The world is a prison of words. The beginning of wisdom is to call things by their proper names. Of all the tools we have invented, words are the most powerful, the most productive, and the most dangerous. Words can classify, identify, conceptualize, abstract, beautify. But words have a darker side as well. Words can organize rational similarities, but words can also create false divisions. Us versus them. Citizen versus immigrant. Tyrant versus leader. Terrorist versus freedom fighter. Money versus paper. Through the slippery genius of language, crimes can be redefined as virtues, virtues as vices, enslavement as obedience, brute hierarchies as society, assaults on children as discipline. Euphemisms, misdirections, reversals, and outright lies infest our minds, bewildering, confusing, and isolating us. If we are to change the downward spiral of our world, we must escape from the fog of false words to the reality of reason and truth. Just think of the words that surround you that have no connection to anything real or tangible or true or good. You say you are an American, a Canadian, Danish, Iranian, or Australian. What is that? What is a country? A country is land, water, plains, and mountains, and something called borders that exist only in our minds, in drawings, in words. A beach is where the ocean meets the land, a real division. A country is a color on a map, an imaginary enclosure of legal containment. Countries arise when warlords run up against other warlords they cannot conquer, or when they have mostly finished killing off or enslaving the indigenous population. Countries are the chalk outlines of bodies, of ancient and modern crimes. Countries are the fences around farms, designed to keep you, the citizen, in place. When you go from one country to another, what changes? Not the color of the sky, your hairdo, or the laws of physics. No. All that changes are the enforced rules called laws, and the rulers who are legally allowed to enforce them. Countries are regions where the power of particular political rulers holds sway. They are land controlled by governments. When you say, "I am an American," what you're really saying is that you are ruled by the American government. It would be more accurate to say, "I am the property of the American government," or "proud livestock of the English tax farm." If dairy cows could talk, they would say, "I am owned by Farmer Jones," or "I am kept on the Jones farm." How is it different for you? This is the great danger of words. Countries are places where a tiny minority can use force to make you obey their words, called laws. In a country, you must obey the millions of constantly changing words, or you will be kidnapped and caged. It doesn't matter how many words there are, or whether it's even possible to know them all. You can be locked up for disobeying the unknowable at any time. These magic words can convert people from honest citizen to evil criminal at the stroke of a pen. In 1933, in America, it was legal to own gold and illegal to drink alcohol. The next year, it was legal to drink alcohol and illegal to own gold. Who alone has the power to do this? The state. The state is a group of individuals with a monopoly on the legal use of violence. And it is only words that blind us from seeing this basic truth. Words have the dangerous power to obscure the moral reality of the state. The word law sounds better than force. Social contract sounds better than enforced obedience. Taxation sounds better than theft. Central banking sounds better than counterfeiting. Corporation sounds better than legal immunity. Arrest sounds better than kidnapping. National debt sounds better than selling off the unborn. Democracy sounds better than mob rule. Public school sounds better than forced indoctrination. Sorry, what's that? You say you are free because you live in a democracy?
I thought that it was a matter of real concern that planted stories intended to serve a national purpose abroad came home and were circulated here and believed here, because this would mean that the CIA could manipulate the news in the United States by channeling it through some foreign country. Now, we're looking at that very carefully.
Do you have any people being paid by the CIA who are contributing to a major circulation American journal?
We do have people who submit pieces to American journals.
Do you have any people paid by the CIA who are working for television networks?
This, I think, gets into the kind of getting into the details, Mr. Chairman, that I'd like to get into in executive session.
You are attacking our news organization. Can you give us a chance?
Your organization
You are attacking our news organization.
Your organization.
Can you give us a chance
Let's
to ask a question, sir?
Go ahead.
Sir, can you state?
I think it was disgraceful that the intelligence agencies allowed any information that turned out to be so false and fake.
For pennies on the dollar, the space program has improved our lives, advanced our society, strengthened our economy, and inspired generations of Americans. And I have no doubt that NASA can continue to fulfill this role.
Mr. President, would you have liked to have made a bigger commitment to the space program in terms of money for the future than you have?
I'll try to do all that's possible against the problems. This program is the highest priority.
To expand human knowledge of the atmosphere and space, and to pursue the practical benefits gained from these activities in order to improve the lot of mankind. And we saluted right along with him when he planted Old Glory in the lunar soil. NASA's done so much to galvanize our spirit as a people, to reassure us of our greatness and of our potential. In recent days, the Space Shuttle has, as another NASA project before it or other projects before it, captured our hearts and imaginations.
Decade for the 1990s space station freedom, our critical next step in all our space endeavors, and next for the new century, back to the moon, back to the future, and this time back to stay. And then a journey into tomorrow, a journey to another planet, a manned mission to Mars.
Using the Crew Exploration Vehicle, we will undertake extended human missions to the moon as early as 2015, with the goal of living and working there for increasingly extended periods of time.
The time for empty talk is over. Now arrives the hour of action. Do not allow anyone to tell you that it cannot be done. No challenge can match the heart and fight and spirit of America. We will not fail. Our country will thrive and prosper again. We stand at the birth of a new millennium, ready to unlock the mysteries of space, to free the earth from the miseries of disease, and to harness the energies, industries, and technologies of tomorrow. Our journey into space will not only make us stronger and more prosperous, but will unite us behind grand ambitions and bring us all closer together. Wouldn't that be nice? Can you believe that space is going to do that? I thought politics would do that. Well, we'll have to rely on space. Every launch into the skies is another step forward toward a future where our differences seem small against the vast expanse of our common humanity. Sometimes you have to view things from a distance in order to see the real truth. It is America's destiny to be at the forefront of humanity's eternal quest for knowledge and to be the leader amongst nations on our adventure into the great unknown. And I could say the great and very beautiful unknown. Nothing more beautiful. With the actions we're launching today, America will think big. Once again, important words, think big. We haven't been thinking so big for a long time. We're thinking big again as a country. We will inspire millions of children to carry on this proud tradition of American space leadership, and we're excited. And to never stop wondering, hoping, and dreaming about what lies beyond the stars. So I just want to tell you that we are now going to sign an executive order, and this is going to launch a whole new chapter for our great country. And people are very excited about it, and I'm very excited about it. Thank you all very much.
Why has nobody been to the moon in such a long time?
That's not an 8-year-old's question. That's my question. I want to know what I think I know. Because we didn't go there, and that's the way it happened. And if it didn't happen, it's nice to know why it didn't happen, so in the future, if we want to keep doing something, we need to know why something stopped in the past if we wanted to keep it going. Money is a good thing.
All the members of humanity. Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
They like to hit and then they like to hide out. But we're going to smoke them out and to hold them accountable. And the United States is proud to lead the coalition.
I do. We're building a relationship that just did not exist. I said in our last trip when you were with me that we had a huge trust deficit, in part because the United States had, to be fair, we had helped to create the problem we're now fighting. How? Because when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, we had this brilliant idea that we were going to come to Pakistan and create a force of mujahideen, equip them with Stinger missiles and everything else to go after the Soviets inside Afghanistan. And we were successful. The Soviets left Afghanistan, and then we said, great, goodbye, leaving these trained people who were fanatical in Afghanistan and Pakistan, leaving them well armed, creating a mess, frankly, that at the time we didn't really recognize. We were just so happy to see the Soviet Union fall, and we thought, okay, fine, we're okay now. Everything's going to be so much better. Now you look back, the people we're fighting today, we were supporting in the fight against the Soviets.
We also have a history of kind of moving in and out of Pakistan. I mean, let's remember here, the people we are fighting today, we funded 20 years ago. And we did it because we were locked in this struggle with the Soviet Union They invaded Afghanistan, and we did not want to see them control Central Asia, and we went to work. And it was President Reagan, in partnership with the Congress, led by Democrats, who said, you know what, sounds like a pretty good idea.
My message is that we'll be watching you.
You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you?
Welcome to the UN. Thank you very much.
How dare you?
Welcome to the UN. Thank you very much.
You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words. How dare you?
Welcome to the UN. Thank you very much.
And yet, I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering. People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you?
Welcome to the UN. Thank you very much.
Then you would be evil, and that I refuse to believe. The popular idea of cutting our emissions in half in 10 years only gives us a 50% chance of staying below 1.5 degrees and the risk of setting off irreversible chain reactions beyond human control. 50% may...
It means urgency. This is urgent. It's an emergency.
Sia la sfida che abbiamo davanti, dobbiamo puntare sulla educazione, che apre la mente e i cuori ad una comprensione più larga e più profonda della realtà. Serve un patto educativo globale.
We need a global compact on education. The world needs to be re-educated, and we need the leaders of the world to come together and sign this compact. And a compact, of course, is a firm contract, promise, treaty, or an agreement. So he's calling on everybody to come together. I wonder who's going to write that out. I say facetiously, it'll probably be produced by the Vatican, and have everyone agree that we need to re-educate the world on.
And of course, you've got each side that can't see they're just like the other, and they're even operating by the same dubious tactics and utilizing similar approaches, making them identical, okay? What we really need to do is look at the inordinate control and power the system is gaining and has gained over us, okay? People are losing the ability to acquire the other side of the argument, whether it's moon hoax, flat earth, 9/11, aliens, it doesn't matter what you believe. Even if you were curious about some of these things and you wanted to debunk them, you couldn't do it. The only thing you would get would be hit pieces, and you don't have any legitimate information on the other side, okay? The controllers are molding people's perceptions and limiting them to a small box. And it's like, how can you think that you have a well-informed opinion without information of the other side? And that's the point I've been driving at with this censorship push, the modern day book burning, if you will, because if you control the information, you get to control the perceptions and opinions of folks. So not only can they affect the attitudinal changes and behaviors of people through distorting and manipulating facts, but they're effectively usurping the resistance. And I got at that before, where the up-and-coming generations, they're born into the police state, they're born into schools with facial recognition, and born into a world where most, if not all, information is either consolidated, skewed, or buried altogether. So there's little wiggle room available to those trying to reach like-minded people, even outside of the main vein. That's what this push is doing. And that's another reason why we're stepping away from politics, because again, to turn a blind eye or embrace willful ignorance in matters like these tells me all I need to know. No matter the subject, if folks aren't willing to look at something dispassionately and see the facts objectively, that says the gears just aren't turning. So if we're looking for thoughtful, dispassionate discourse, the political arena is not the field for that. Because there's actually more going on in the world than we're just talking about greedy corporations, corrupt bankers, zany politicians, and wealthy families of influence on like that. There's no way, okay? There's forces beyond just humans, beyond just people. So we have to see matters beyond purely human factors and influence. Because if you don't, these subjects can begin to take on a mostly men in business suits sipping whiskey and puffing cigars in a smoke-filled room planning what's next type feel, right? And while I'm sure there's a breath of truth to that, it doesn't wholly correspond to the reality at hand. The rabbit hole is much deeper. It seems like these corrupt, morally bankrupt people have a low vibrational energetic compatibility with entities of akin qualities, okay? And these beings attach themselves to these people and become symbiotes, okay? And then these symbiotes have subtle, sometimes overt influences over their host, if you can imagine a soft possession type deal. All right, so when we elevate the corrupt, morally bankrupt people into power, we're also putting these apparently overwhelming demonic-like entities into power. So now you can sort of begin to see how we are pulling back the veil a bit on why it seems like these jokers are constantly engaging in activities to the destruction of the country and the people they claim to represent. All right, and it would seem that if there's not that symbiotic relationship I pointed out, then there's at least homage to these beings and rituals and blood sacrifice, okay? And there's hardly any bigger blood sacrifice than the often instigated and manufactured wars, or the wars that we started or got involved in based on false impetus, right? And this help alludes to the reason why we see the poisoning of our water, the genetic modification of our food, known harmful vaccine adjuvants, spraying chemicals in the air, all that stuff, okay? Because you have to ask, if they're doing this, aren't they doing this to themselves? And the answer is, on one hand, they aren't really, because they live completely different lives from us. I mean, after all, when one of the Rothschilds came to buy some yacht in Texas, he brought his own food and water with him. Okay, and that there's a battle playing out right now, both physical and spiritual, and the result of that battle is going to have devastating consequences. Look,
once in a while, I get people that really, that claim they don't believe in evolution. And my response generally is, why not? Really, why not?
You guys believe 20 billion years ago there was a big bang where nothing exploded and produced everything. 4.6 billion years ago the earth cooled down, made a hard rocky crust. It rained on the rocks for millions of years, turned them into soup, and the soup came alive 3 billion years ago. Found somebody to marry, and something to eat, of course, and slowly evolved into everything we see today. There are some lies in our science books. Taught it for 15 years. Even though I'm not teaching it anymore, I still like to study. It's so many neat things to learn. We're going to cover some of that tonight. I'm not against science, I'm not against schools, I'm not against teachers, because most of them don't know what they believe. You have to tell them. They teach the kids it all started with a big bang 20 billion years ago. What exploded? This is what the textbooks teach.
Before the Big Bang, there was nothing, literally nothing, an infinitesimal nugget of space. And then something happened, triggering the most colossal explosion in history.
Yes, boys and girls, you see, nothing exploded, and here we are. So I asked this professor if I could ask him some questions about the Big Bang. I said, where did all this matter come from? He said, well, we don't know that for sure. I said, well, sir, would you please tell me where the laws came from? The universe is run by laws, gravity, centrifugal force, inertia. Who gave the laws? He said, we don't know that either. I said, sir, could you tell me where the energy came from? You know, it takes energy to make a Big Bang. Who bought the gas to run this machine anyway? He said, we don't know that either. I said, sir, could I ask you another question? He said, sure. What else would you like to know? Else? What do you mean else? You haven't told me nothing yet. I said, does Berkeley have a merry-go-round? You see, if a spinning object breaks apart in a frictionless environment, the fragments will all spin the same direction. The professor said, yes, I understand about the conservation of angular momentum. I said, well, good. I'd like to ask you a question then, sir. If the whole universe began as a swirling dot, like you said, why do two planets spin backwards? He said, that's interesting. I said, no, that's more than interesting. It's kind of hard on your Big Bang Theory. Not only that, 6 of the moons are spinning backwards. Why? He said, I don't know. Why do you think they're going backwards? I was hoping he was going to ask that. I said, okay, now, sir, hold it. If I told you that I believe God created the heaven and the earth like the Bible teaches, you're going to say, and where did God come from? And I don't know. But you said, well, we don't know that for sure. We don't know that either. Don't tell me my theory is religious and yours is science. Oh, no, sir, they're both religious. Evolution is a religion. You have to believe. So I asked the professor, where did the matter come from? He said, I don't know. So basically, I believe in the beginning God, and you believe in the beginning dirt. One professor was getting kind of upset about this time. He said, Mr. Hovind, there are hundreds of varieties of dogs in the world. He said, do you mean to tell me that you believe all these dogs came from 2 dogs off of Noah's Ark? You expect me to believe that? I said, sir, would you look at what you're teaching your students? You're teaching your students that all the dogs in the world came from a rock.
Charles Darwin was disciplined. I mean, he did these extraordinary experiments, this series of experiments.
Then they're going to tell the kids, well, we have evidence for this theory. Charlie Darwin stopped off at these islands right there called the Galapagos Islands. Charlie studied the birds very carefully and said, you know what? I think all these birds had a common ancestor. I bet you're right, Charlie. It was a bird. You see 14 kinds of birds, and you conclude that birds and bananas are related.
Here are these ancient dinosaur bones or fossils.
They tell the kids they have evidence of evolution from fossils. I don't think so. If you find a fossil in the dirt, all you know is it died. You don't know that it had any kids. And you sure don't know that it had different kids. You bring in a bone to the judge. Judge, I found this bone in the dirt. This is the ancestor of all the humans today. They would laugh at you. You don't know that that's the ancestor of anybody. And why on earth would you think a bone in the dirt can do something animals today cannot do? They'll say, boys and girls, you have 2 bones in your wrist, radius and ulna. And boys and girls, look at the whale's flipper carefully. Did you know the whale has 2 bones in his flipper? And they're called the radius and the ulna? Same as ours. Wow. Who named them, teacher? The whale? Think about it.
I'm here to tell my people it's time to stop believing bull just because I tell you bull with a straight look on their face. Evolution say people came from monkeys. And the question is, why is there still monkeys? Is these the retarded monkeys? They didn't turn into people just yet.
Even Stephen Gould admitted the absence of fossil evidence for intermediary stages is a persistent and nagging problem for evolution. See, what's happened, these guys have looked for missing links in the fossil record. They can't find any, and so they say, well, maybe evolution happened so fast it wasn't preserved. Maybe a reptile laid an egg and a bird hatched out. Well, who did that bird marry?
This process that brought us to be is billions of years old. It happens very fast, billions of years fast. Here is radioactivity.
We're going to tell the kids in the late 1940s they invented carbon dating. We're going to explain a little bit about radiometric dating and how it's supposed to work, and then show you that it does not work, okay? It sounds good, but there are some assumptions that mess everything up. If we had walked into a room and found a candle burning on the table, and I asked you the question, when was it lit? You say, I don't know, Mr. Hovind, it's burning when I got here. Okay, well then let's do some empirical science. Let's measure the height of the candle. Suppose the candle is 7 inches tall. Who can tell me when it was lit? Okay, nobody. Let's do some more empirical science. Let's measure the rate of burn. Suppose we determine it's burning 1 inch an hour. When was it lit? You're going to have a hard time telling me unless you're willing to make some assumptions. You find a fossil in the dirt. You can measure how much C14 is in it. Very accurately, by the way. And you can measure how fast it's decaying. That's just like measuring the height of your candle and how fast it's burning. Now, when did that animal die? You don't have a clue. Here's what you ought to consider about carbon dating. Samples of known age, it doesn't work. If it's a sample of unknown age, it is assumed to work.
It's just really a hard thing. It's really a hard thing. Your world just becomes fantastically complicated when you don't believe in evolution.
Freshly killed seal, carbon dated 1,300 years old. Shells from living snails, carbon dated 27,000 years old. Living penguins, carbon dated 8,000 years old. One part of Dima was 40,000 years old, another part was 26,000, and the wood next to it is 9,000. Then they tell the kids about the geologic column. They say each of the layers is a different age, you know, Cenozoic, Mesozoic, Paleozoic, Archeozoic, all them zoic boys. Now, if you get a petrified tree standing up, running through different rock layers, I don't think it's smart to say those layers are vastly different ages. Those trees did not get slowly covered by the sediments over millions of years. They would rot and fall down.
Crazy.
They'll say, boys and girls, you have an appendix that you don't need anymore. That's a vestigial structure. That's proof of evolution. Well, excuse me, you do need your appendix. The appendix is part of your immune system. If your appendix is taken out, you can still live, okay, but it increases your susceptibility to quite a few diseases. You could live without both your legs and both your arms and both your eyes also. That doesn't prove you don't need them. There are no vestigial organs, and even if there were, that would be the opposite of evolution. That's losing, not gaining. I was taught when I went to school, man used to have a tail, but he lost it because he didn't need it. I thought, didn't need it? Have you ever thought how handy a tail would be? Have you ever come to the door with 2 sacks of groceries? Wouldn't that be nice, man, be able to grab that door and walk right around and get in it? Lost it because we didn't need it. Man, you could drive the car and tune the radio knob and hold the Coke at the same time.
What we're finding is that natural selection seems to be an incredibly important factor in generating new species.
Natural selection, the key evolutionary mechanism Darwin identified.
The bad designs get eaten by the good ones, and so all you have is good ones.
Why is there still monkeys?
Natural selection doesn't cause any evolution. It makes sure the bad ones don't survive, but it's not going to change it to something else.
That's what evolution is.
If you worked in a factory that produced cars, and your job was to check for defects, and you caught every single mistake, and you rejected it, how long would it take that process to change the car to an airplane? You say it'll never change it. That's my point. The students are taught we have evidence from development. Darwin considered this by far the strongest single class of evidence. This textbook says the human embryo growing in the mother has gills like a fish. Those little folds of skin are not gills. Those little wrinkles under your chin when you're growing up later develop into bones in the ear and glands in the throat. They never have anything to do with breathing. I've seen folks that have 5 or 6 chins and they can't breathe through any of them but the top one. Those are not gill slits. Ernst Haeckel, though, said the turning point in his thinking was when he read Darwin's book. He made huge charts of his posters of his drawings of these embryos and traveled all over Germany and just about by himself converted the Germans to believing in evolution. Haeckel took a drawing of a dog and a human embryo and he changed them to make them look exactly alike. On top are Haeckel's fake drawings. Underneath are actual photographs of what he claimed he was drawing a picture of. Now, either he's a lousy artist or he's a liar. Well, it turns out he's a liar. He was convicted of fraud by his own university, proven to be a fraud. But guess what? Haeckel's fake drawings are still used in textbooks in your state right now. It's only been proven wrong 125 years ago. I know it takes a while to get textbooks up to date, but that ought to be plenty of time. Adolf Hitler said, "You let me control the textbooks, I'll control the state." Watch this sentence here carefully. Some kid's doing this for homework tonight. Boys and girls, do you think humans are still evolving? Now, what kind of question is that? Doesn't that question assume that evolution has happened? What if a kid doesn't believe in evolution? How's he supposed to do his homework tonight? That question does not teach him how to think critically. That teaches him what to think, not how to think. And when the kid gets done with this course, he's going to think he knows how to think. But he doesn't. He knows how to be told what to think. Brainwashing at taxpayer expense. They want to use my tax dollars to teach that to your kids in our schools.
If you want to deny evolution, that's fine. But don't make your kids do it, because we need them.
And that's where the problem comes in. Okay? If you want to believe in the Big Bang, just enjoy yourself, but keep your religion at home. The Russian atheist astronomer came to America and spoke at one of the universities, and he started off his speech, he said, "Folks, either there is a God or there isn't. Both possibilities are frightening. If there is no God, we're in trouble. We're hurtling through space around the sun right now at 66,000 miles an hour, and nobody's in charge." That's a scary thought.
This is the story of your enslavement, how it came to be, and how you can finally be free. Like all animals, human beings want to dominate and exploit the resources around them. At first, we mostly hunted and fished and ate off the land, but then something magical and terrible happened to our minds. We became, alone among the animals, afraid of death and of future loss. And this was the start of a great tragedy and an even greater possibility. You see, when we become afraid of death, of injury and imprisonment, we become controllable and so valuable in a way that no other resource could ever be. The greatest resource for any human being to control is not natural resources or tools or animals or land, but other human beings. You can frighten an animal because animals are afraid of pain in the moment, but you cannot frighten an animal with a loss of liberty, with torture or imprisonment in the future, because animals have very little sense of tomorrow. You cannot threaten a cow with torture or a sheep with death. You cannot swing a sword at a tree and scream at it to produce more fruit, or hold a burning torch to a field and demand more wheat. You cannot get more eggs by threatening a hen, but you can get a man to give you his eggs by threatening him. This human farming has been the most profitable and destructive occupation throughout history, and it is now reaching its destructive climax. Human society cannot be rationally understood until it is seen for what it is: a series of farms where human farmers own human livestock. Some people get confused because governments provide healthcare and water and education and roads, and thus imagine that there is some benevolence at work. Nothing could be further from the reality. Farmers provide healthcare and irrigation and training to their livestock. Some people get confused because we are allowed certain liberties and thus imagine that our governments protect our freedoms. But farmers plant their crops a certain distance apart to increase their yields, and will allow certain animals larger stalls or fields if it means they will produce more meat and milk. In your country, your tax farm, your farmer grants you certain freedoms, not because he cares about your liberties, but because he wants to increase his profits. Are you beginning to see the nature of the cage you were born into? There have been 4 major phases of human farming. The first phase in ancient Egypt was direct and brutal human compulsion. Human bodies were controlled, but the creative productivity of the human mind remained beyond the reach of the whip and the brand and the shackles. Slaves remained woefully underproductive and required enormous resources to control. The second phase was the Roman model, wherein slaves were granted some capacity for freedom, ingenuity, and creativity, which raised their productivity. This increased the wealth of Rome, and thus the tax income of the Roman government, and with this additional wealth Rome became an empire, destroying the economic freedoms that fed its power, and collapsed. I'm sure that this does not seem entirely unfamiliar. After the collapse of Rome, the feudal model introduced the concept of livestock ownership and taxation. Instead of being directly owned, peasants farmed land that they could retain as long as they paid off the local warlords. This model eventually broke down due to the continual subdivision of productive land and was destroyed during the enclosure movement when land was consolidated and hundreds of thousands of peasants were kicked off their ancestral lands because new farming techniques made larger farms more productive with fewer people. The increased productivity of the later Middle Ages created the excess food required for the expansion of towns and cities, which in turn gave rise to the modern democratic model of human ownership. As displaced peasants flooded into the cities, a huge stock of cheap human capital became available to the rising industrialists. And the ruling class of human farmers quickly realized that they could make more money by letting their livestock choose their own occupations. Under the democratic model, direct slave ownership has been replaced by the mafia model. The mafia rarely owns businesses directly, but rather sends thugs around once a month to steal from the business owners. You are now allowed to choose your own occupation, which raises your productivity, and thus to your owners. The great challenge of the democratic model is that increases in wealth and freedom threaten the farmers. The ruling classes initially profit from a relatively free market in capital and labor, but as their livestock become more used to their freedoms and growing wealth, they begin to question why they need rulers at all. Ah well, nobody ever said that human farming was easy. Keeping the taxed livestock securely in the compounds of the ruling classes is a three-phase process. The first is to indoctrinate the young through government, quote, education. As the wealth of democratic countries grew, government schools were universally inflicted in order to control the thoughts and souls of the livestock. The second phase is to turn citizens against each other through the creation of dependent livestock. It is very difficult to rule human beings directly through force, and where it can be achieved, it remains cripplingly underproductive, as can be seen in North Korea. Human beings do not breed well or produce efficiently in direct captivity. But if human beings believe that they are free, then they will produce much more for their farmers. The best way to maintain this illusion of freedom is to put some of the livestock on the payroll of the farmer. Those cows that become dependent on the existing hierarchy will then attack any other cows who point out the violence, hypocrisy, and immorality of human ownership.
Officers positioned Grant face first on the floor with one officer near his head, a second near his back, and a third officer standing nearby. There appeared to be a brief struggle. Then, a 2-year veteran BART officer stands, draws his weapon, and fires.
Freedom is slavery, and slavery is freedom. If you can get the cows to attack each other whenever anybody brings up the reality of their situation, then you don't have to spend nearly as much controlling them directly. Those cows who become dependent upon the stolen largesse of the farmer will violently oppose any questioning of the virtue of human ownership, and the intellectual and artistic classes, always and forever dependent upon the farmers, will say to anyone who demands freedom from ownership, "You will harm your fellow cows." The livestock are thus kept enclosed by shifting the moral responsibility for the destructiveness of a violent system to those who demand real freedom. The third phase is to invent continual external threats so that the frightened livestock cling to the protection of the farmers. This system of human farming is now nearing its end. The terrible tragedies of modern Western economic systems has occurred not in spite of, but because of past economic freedoms. The massive increases in Western wealth throughout the 19th century resulted from economic freedoms. And it was this very increase in wealth that fed the size and power of the state. Whenever the livestock become exponentially more productive, you get a corresponding increase in the number of farmers and their dependents. The growth of the state is always proportional to the preceding economic freedoms. Economic freedoms create wealth, and the wealth attracts more thieves and political parasites, whose greed then destroys the economic freedoms. In other words, freedom metastasizes the cancer of the state. The government that starts off the smallest will always end up the largest. This is why there can be no viable and sustainable alternative to a truly free and peaceful society. A society without political rulers, without human ownership, without the violence of taxation and statism. To be truly free is both very easy and very hard. We avoid the horror of our enslavement because it is so painful to see it directly. We dance around the endless violence of our dying system because we fear the attacks of our fellow livestock. But we can only be kept in the cages we refuse to see. George Orwell once wrote that the great enemy of clear language is insincerity. When there is a gap between one's real and one's declared aims, one turns, as it were, instinctively to long words and exhausted idioms, like a cuttlefish spurting out ink. You've probably heard confusing phrases like the trade deficit, the falling dollar, the national debt, unfunded liabilities, and so on, which all sound vague and actuarial and vaguely, well, not me. The reality behind these accounting phrases is perfectly monstrous. When someone, a foreigner say, loans money to the American government, what are they getting in return? Well, they are getting promises of interest payments and eventual repayment of the principal. Where does your government get this money? The government is not a business. It does not generate profits in the free market. So where does it get the money to repay its creditors? Are you beginning to understand that it is not dollars that are being sold, or bonds, or agency debt, or treasuries, or anything like that? Where is your government going to get the money to pay off its creditors? It's not pieces of paper, or contracts, or computer bits that are being sold. There is only one thing that the government has to sell. Governments have only one asset that they can use as collateral. Your leaders are selling you. When China lends $800 billion to your government, what they get in return is a guarantee that $10,000 plus interest will be taken from your family at gunpoint and shipped overseas. When a farmer gets a loan from a bank, he uses his livestock as collateral. It is the milk and meat his cows will produce in the future that he will use to pay off his loan. The bank is buying a share in his cows. You are the livestock that your leaders use as collateral. The leaders that you cheer for and throw parades for and drop balloons behind and donate money to are selling you to Chinese rulers, to the Japanese, to the Nigerians, to South American drug lords with accounts in the Caribbean banking centers, to Russia, to Korea, to Egypt, to Colombia, to Chile, to the Philippines, to Malaysia, and anyone else who is willing to give them a few dollars in return for the blood, sweat, and toil of your future. The flag that you praise and the anthems that you sing and the rulers that you weep and kneel before have as much loyalty to you as a plantation owner had to his slaves. And sadly, plantation slaves had more pride than we do. Plantation slaves did not generally praise their masters for selling them off, for auctioning off the lives, hopes, dreams, and futures of their own little children. We can understand that cattle may lick the hand of the farmer who lowers an axe to its neck, because cattle are dumb beasts that cannot comprehend their real relationship with the farmer and his imminent plans for them. What is our excuse? When we chant, USA, 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 when we cheer and bow and beg and scrape and sing and weep with joy that some new farmer now presides over the wholesale dismantling and sale of our family's futures, when we love with obsessive emptiness the leaders who laugh while they auction us off to every tin pot dictator and stockbroker the world over, what is our excuse? Has our pride been so broken that we lunge with pathetic joy at every new silver-tongued demagogue who pretends to care for us even a tiny little bit? In the future, our children will demand to know why we knelt and cheered as they were sold off on the auctioneer's block. This video, and my life's work, is my answer to my child. What's yours? Wake up. To see the farm is to leave it.
You can make it, man. We can make it. Together. We can get it together.
Here's the takeaway, my friends. The government is not going to keep you safe. The government is putting you in danger. The government is presiding over a collapse in school standards. The government is presiding over and paying for, in many ways, the drugging of very young children with very dangerous drugs. The government has displaced private and personal and voluntary methodologies for keeping people safe, which is keeping tabs on your neighbors, having chats, having good relationships with the police, making sure that everything is followed through. There is this kind of, throw the ball of responsibility over the fence and never follow up, because the government is now perceived to be taking care of communities. Well, the government is not taking care of communities in Sweden. The government is not taking care of communities in South Africa. The government is not taking care of communities and young women in England. The government is not taking care of you. You are, to the government, taxed livestock, to be programmed, to be exploited, and to be lied to and bribed into voting or surrendering your own freedoms. Free stuff in return for freedoms, and the free stuff will pass, and the loss of freedoms will be permanent. The government is not your friend. The government is not your pal. The government is not your father. The government is not your husband. The government is not just. It is not fair. The government is force. The government is the only agency able to legally initiate the use of force against usually legally disarmed citizens. The government is coercion. The government is fire. It is a very dangerous servant and an entirely tyrannical master. And as long as the government continues to grow, your safety will continue to shrink. Wake up. To see the farm is to leave it.
You can make it, man. We can make it. Together. We can get it together. You can make it, man. We can make it. Together. We can get it together.